Hi, Alysha.
Hello. So happy to be here.
How's your day going?
It's going well. You know, Whenever we're able to connect, I think that that's super exciting. I've been thinking about it all day, but also just I actually enjoy this weather where it's nice and calm. It's time to stay inside.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I went for a walk in the rain. I grabbed my
Nice.
daughter's umbrella, which is like bright purple and polka dot. And something
Love that.
about walking around with a bright purple umbrella in the rain just made me very happy this today. So I'm very,
I love
it's
that.
a good fall weather. I agree with you there.
Yes. Yeah, we finally my husband and I talked about it this morning and we're like, you know what? It's time to fireplace run because we have a pellet stove. I'm like, let's go ahead and bring in the coziness.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So, Alicia, today you and I want to talk about one of the key elements that unlock growth and scale for organizations, which is process standardization. And nobody gets
Yeah.
excited about processes, and nobody gets excited about process standardization except for you and I. So, let's
Right.
start with why do you love processes so much, and what do you do when you're not talking to me about this?
Yeah, no, I love that. I do. I get very excited. And because it offers that opportunity for us to know exactly what's going on. Brain is very happy with how those workflows come together. And the idea of kind of taking a very cluttered, virtual space for me and finding ways to we call it find our home spot, right? So everything has its spot, it has its place, you know where to find it, you know where to tell someone else to find it. This creates all of that clarity in the space. And when you're all done, it's like, this is beautiful. So,
Yes, yes,
yeah.
completely with you. The concept of clarity goes a really long way because when steps are clear, when roles are clear, when locations for files are clear,
Yes.
that's when we can actually start moving fast. Once we
Mhm.
start introducing any sort of room for ambiguity, that's when things start to slow down. So if
Right.
you're a founder that, you have product market fit and you're excited to go fast and you're excited to go
Mhm.
far, means you
Yeah,
actually need to slow down and figure out what is actually happening first.
I know. Right. And isn't that the hardest part? Like that moment when you're like, oh, I'm ready to go. And then it's like, whoo, hold on, let's get this all lined up first.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, so then let's start with why I'm talking to you about this. Tell me a little bit about Veraclade.
Yeah, absolutely. So we been around for almost 4 years and very excited around the whole process of being able to optimize workflows. And with that, what that brings is that return on being able to have time back in your day, have clarity, reduce stress. And so it's really the foundation of why we get excited about it. Ul- Ultimately, though, it's looking to see where does all the data sit? And oftentimes we're finding a little over here and a little over here, and so does it this way, and so does it this way. Not everything's succinct, and so it's just disjointed and causes a lot of chaos. And so we get excited about bringing together that single source of truth. And in that, as we've grown, even in our own scaling and strategy, have found that we get really excited about being a full scope strategy partner in that capacity. So how are you from start to finish moving all of the information across your team out to your stakeholders who have that decision making and then out to your, of course, customers or clients. So the whole process is just I like you said at the beginning, I get excited about it, but it creates such a great return when you're all done and you've got it all packaged up nicely and ready to be fully functional.
So there's a reason why I get excited about this, right? If from the standpoint of revenue operations and actually enabling
Mhm.
growth for an organization, one of the things that I always talk about is that it's never going to be a silver bullet that solves all your
Mhm.
problems. There's not a tool you can magically plug in that's going
Right.
to shorten your sales cycle. There's not a channel that you just can start investing into that's going to make your business grow. You need to look
Mhm.
at the entire customer journey from the very, very beginning when they're starting to become aware of the fact that you might solve their problem, all the way
Mhm.
through to repurchase, whatever that might look like within your organization. And we start with what the customer is experiencing it and then seeing who and what touches the customer, right? And
Mhm.
from there, we see how to enable that experience to be better. So my approach is very human client, customer, and user focused, and then what do we
Yes.
do internally to accelerate that or improve that. And your
Hmm.
approach is people have to do work and they have to do
Yes.
it well and they have to do it quickly. How do we make
Yeah.
it better for them, right? So when you put those two
Mhm.
together, makes an enormous difference for what the business can
Yeah,
actually do.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And that's why it's so exciting. The output is just like it's so cohesive.
Exactly. I actually have a mini story to share. There's a client that I was working with that was setting up a call center. And the first time they had a call center, this is the first time they were trying to put something in place that to allow them to kind of centralize and automate and streamline a lot of their customer conversations. And they were focusing a lot on the customer experience, and they were not focusing a lot on the call center agent experience, as in, how does the person actually answering the call get access to all of the information that they're supposed to have?
Right.
So these poor agents, they had to go to 5 different platforms to try and
Mhm.
actually figure out what was going on. And as a result, it was so painful for the customer, right? Because you have the agent who's there and saying, okay, hold on, let me just look that up for you. And there's only so much you can do to actually fill the space of the conversation. The entire customer experience was terrible. So I'm going to go on and say, if you're not enabling your team to have a good experience working, it's going to be very hard for them to provide a good experience for the customer.
Yes, absolutely. And that the aspects of like how they get to show up, internal environment is something I get super passionate about. How are people able to when they are at work? Because it translates so directly to how your business does.
Absolutely. All right. It looks like we're having a little bit of gaps with internet. So I'm going to pause the recording for a moment and we're going to see what we do next. I think we're back in business. So thank you for your patience. Let's go back to talking about standardized processes. Okay. We
Yes.
might all agree that it's important, but for the most cases that you and I are talking about,
Mhm.
really creating a standardized process means you know what that looks like. So, not a lot of
Yes.
founders maybe have that really good idea of what good looks like in this case. Let's talk through what it looks
Yeah.
like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just like you stated, a lot of times when we're working with founders, they have been doing things kind of on autopilot, essentially. A lot of
Yes.
information lives in their brain. And being able to really identify what are you doing on a repeat basis? What is a part of your daily routine and extract that out of them, essentially. And their leadership, if they have leadership teams or go-to managers, things like that, really being able to identify what each of them is responsible for and getting that documented.
Mhm.
So, documented in a way too that identifies the handoff pieces, not just who's responsible for the given segment, but how does it move from segment to segment and person to person or department to department. And so that standardized piece then creates a repeatable process, which is exciting. It creates a really strong training opportunity for new team members, and scalability of the entire organization can then take off. Like you were talking about earlier, being able to move fast, we have to move slow first, kind of go backwards and establish that, and then move fast after we get it all set up.
So, yes, and I want to add a couple of elements. So, one, those transition places
Yeah.
that you're talking about, how it can go from segment to segment, those are the places that the most revenue gets lost from my experience, right? Whether it's legacy information
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't carry through, that somebody needs to spend time
Right.
recollecting, or if it's the timeliness of the handoff and what the next person is supposed to do with it, those transitions
Yes.
are so important. And when you are working on autopilot and you have all of the stuff in your brain that you just know, you
Yeah.
forget that not everybody's living in your brain. So let's
Right.
talk about structured data. I am a
Mm-hmm.
huge fan of structured data because then you can actually
Yes.
use the data to do something. But how do you handle the fact that capturing structured data is a resource drain? And most people will talk about the fact that they don't have time to put all that information into all of these neat little boxes that we've created.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one place is I always encourage any founder or team to start with what they have. We can start off and get it all in one place. Then we're really quickly seeing where the gaps in information are. And that means you can delegate someone to fill in those gaps. We can kind of capture that as we're going, and it can be more interview style. And that takes the burden off of the founder from like they have to like dive into this like very big undertaking. And so you segment it out, and it can happen over time if that's needed. Happen all at once if a intensive session is required.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the urgency of needing the information active, able to pull that all out can happen a lot of ways.
I am actually going to keep that in because that is exactly what people often feel like when we're trying to structure their
That is
processes.
so true. So true. It's
I
just
love
I'm
it.
gonna tip right over. That is but that's why it's so great to be able to partner with someone who
Mhm.
has that be, it's just part of their process and part of their routine, because when it starts getting overwhelming, we can offer other alternatives. That can look like Loom video recordings for, just talking through how data needs to be structured or formatted. That can be, like I said, we will just take a data dump. My team will digest it, we'll format it, and then we kick it back and say, what did we miss? Or what isn't intuitive based off of just the information you shared? Because what we're looking to do is get it in action as fast as possible without interrupting the regular business day-to-day workflow.
And oh,
Gonna be funny. Yeah.
you're back.
I'm very animated and then I shake my desk.
I do the same thing. My like jiggles and I have post-it notes on it, so I notice them
Oh,
jiggling if I'm being
funny.
too animated. So
Yes.
I hear you completely. Okay, this is an interesting comment you have in terms of we can take some of the load off and then bring it
Mm-hmm.
to you in terms of as something documented. In my experience, in order to create processes that enable scale and speed, it does need to be more of a cultural change. So the
Mm-hmm.
process of change management is not as simple as we're just going to document it and let you run with it. It's
Right.
about getting the entire team to understand the importance of it and really working on behavior change across the
Mm-hmm.
entire organization.
Yeah.
How,
Yeah.
how do
I
you
would
get that started?
Right. So one of the things, and this is a couple different ways. So that's where typically after we help create and this is standardized information, right? Like how are we actually pulling all the different pieces together and having them have like that home spot live always.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's doing that intensive training or collaborative training sessions with the teams we're working with. And that can look like live sessions where we're coming in and like 15-minute stand-ups just to get them comfortable with their data input. Some teams are actually supplying an admin that's
Mm-hmm.
comfortable and familiar with their workflow, and the admin's going to keep their data up to date until they've adopted it. And so when they've adopted the entire workflow, now they're comfortable with it. We don't have to help with that administrative support. But ultimately, we're always doing trainings. And so the trainings often look like Loom video captures of how to do segmented pieces of the work, or we use Tango to be
Mm-hmm.
able to capture a guide me option so that they can be doing the data entry in real time while doing that guide me option. And they can use that as many times as they need to till it's muscle memory. So the adoption happens pieces, but throughout the process, another really key important piece is to get those cheerleaders on the team, the people who like
Yes.
the technology, are excited about it, and really dig into what they'd like to see happen with it, how they'd like it to be structured and processed,
Mm-hmm.
and then customizing it to the best of our
They have. And I have a list of these questions that I have in my guide. But the point is, everybody needs to be able to know this information so they can support each other through the
yeah,
process.
absolutely.
And when we introduce this and we introduce this as foundational expectation that everybody needs to know this, you start asking these questions and
Hmm.
people find the answers in the standardized process. So the
Yes.
concept of you set the expectation and the way that you accomplish the expectation is through this process that was created with enough at bats people start going to the setup process in order to make sure that they're reaching that objective.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. Having a place to go find the information, feeling like they have that empowerment is so important for sure.
Okay. One of the items I wanted to talk about, I'm going to pull this up so that I can read it more accurately.
Yeah.
MIT published a study, I think it was in September or maybe the end of August, that talks about the fact that 95% of Gen AI pilots in organizations fail. And it looks like they're failing because there wasn't standard documentation and standardization of process prior to the implementation of the Gen
Right.
AI pilot.
Right. I find that incredibly, like, I guess it like reinforces the need for all of this, right? It's validating, I guess, is the word I was looking for there.
Yes.
Because whether it's technology, your team, or whatnot, you're only as good as like what you are set up for, right? So you can only perform when you know the expectations, and that clarity would be like clarity is kindness, right? Being clear and concise, transparent, and all of that is where we create that space for people to work freely and have limited instruction or limited documentation in that. Then that's just what it is. There are gaps. It's hard to jump from one spot to the next. Those transitions, like we said, become a pit where things fall through the cracks and you don't know where they went. And so, me, with the utilization, we use AI in different ways as we're working through workflow automation and optimizing that piece. And you do have to be very intentional. It's kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like the instruction for how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The like put the peanut butter on top. What, that could be the crust top of the bread. Like there's just like details that are missing. And when we are founders, as founders, we set up an idea of how things can go. And when we're translating it, then we have background knowledge that we are unaware of. And it's almost like that kind of a bias of how we do something as well. So there's a couple of things going on there. But spelling it out very, very detailed. And that's actually one thing that we bring up with founders very frequently. We will go through a task list and we will start filling in some like very granular details, and they will go through and read through it and they're like, well, I don't think I need this. And I said, well, would someone know to do that if you didn't tell them? If you were out of office, not reachable, what would happen if that task didn't happen? Would it, and they're like, okay, well, we'll keep that. And I'm like, exactly. It's okay at some process pieces to say not applicable or not, this project that's not required, but I would much rather have it marked that way than it be a gap in knowledge. So
absolutely.
Yes.
Very similar conversation I frequently have with founders, and usually this is around the specificity of messaging and kind of internal communication about who we are as a company. Nobody lives in your brain.
No.
You as a founder know so much more and think so much more about your business, and you might have the most rock star stellar employees. We don't live in your brain.
Right.
So you need to be very clear and spell out, this is who we are, this is how we talk, and this is what we do in each situation. Here's why. So completely agree with you. And I like the way that you were phrasing it. If you were completely unreachable,
yes,
would they know to do this?
Yeah.
Most of the time the answer is no, or maybe they'll just wouldn't risk. And that's part of it, right? You're de-risking yourself and creating very detailed documentations. I think the other area where we have these Gen 8 pilots fail is because of their data. You need to have very clean data, not asterisks and notes, not something that lives in the back of somebody's mind. They remember that in this case, it means something different. Not when you spell the name as first name, last name versus last name, first name, real client example, which actually indicates something for what this customer does. Clean data, and this having to do that work information is going to work through.
Right.
And really, I think this is what you do, is trying to get through and really understand the process
Mhm.
so that you're not putting anything in place that is generic or plug and play,
Right.
and creating it customized to exactly what the business needs.
Mhm.
But also in defining what the business needs, you're forcing alignment within the organization.
Yes. Yeah. And it's exciting and it can be uncomfortable to do that.
Yeah.
We work through a lot of emotions as people are identifying what they want or not want and what they want to do and how they want their team to receive that information. There can be a lot of hesitation. It
Just
is.
challenging assumptions, right? You have to challenge
Yes.
the fact something that you've always assumed to be true apparently is only true for you.
Yes. And that's exactly, it's that, it's so many pieces we can translate from like industry to industry or team member, even team member to team member. But there's like spelling out or like a revisiting of how you are as a clear communicator and in your team versus like helping them along. These amazing people to do these things, and then sometimes maybe I'm only speaking for myself.
I
We
know.
take those things and we help them along.
Mhm.
And what this does is it creates a lot of transparency and a lot of clarity across your entire team. Who's doing what? People are performing. Sometimes that mirror is a big one. How people are showing up in your company for you and alongside you. And it can be a really positive thing to see that your workload is maybe over allocated on some individuals. And it can be a really informative thing too to see that maybe some individuals could use a little more. and
But
but
there's
I
also a lot of
Yeah.
vulnerability in that
Yes.
transparency, right? When you
Yes.
give that clarity, that visibility into it,
Mm-hmm.
it requires self-reflection.
Yes.
You try to work through what role did I play in creating the situation as a
Yep.
founder, and then if you're one of the employees,
Mm-hmm.
you need to.
To go in and be trusted in an organization as an outside entity to say, I value what you're doing here, and I am here to observe and be curious, and I'm going to ask you questions, and we're going to dig through some of these pieces, and there's no judgment in how you're doing it now. There's all just moving forward. We're just working together to be a partner in your success. And I think that that's really valuable and really important. Like I'm surrounded with some amazing people in my team and just community that are really good about being like, you just didn't know. Now you know, and now we're
And
changing because
now that you know,
we
you
have
can
that
do better.
information.
But
Yeah,
until you didn't, you did the
exactly.
best that you knew.
Exactly. So
Absolutely.
so that would be a big one of those big vulnerable pieces that I would just like, if I could shout it from the rooftops, be like, you just didn't know. You're now going to be better. It's all good.
Okay. Last question on my end.
Yeah.
So, if you were a founder that was strategizing for growth and scale, what is the first thing you would do? Where's the first place you would look?
Yeah. Strategizing is it's going to be, it's looking at where you have standardization now. Looking for that growth. Where does your data live? How does it move? How does the person that it's moving to know that it's coming? Like, just it comes down to a lot of clear communication and identifying where things exist, and ultimately, if having a single source of truth, like always wanting to drive for that single source of truth, so that just like we said at the beginning, everything has its home spot. Everyone knows where it goes. Everyone knows where to find it. If it's missing because it's not there.
Yep.
So yeah, those are the big pieces I would start off with.
And I would add to that, if I were a founder strategizing for growth, I would start with, what do I think the customer
Mm-hmm.
experience is?
Yes.
And then doing the research to figure out what it
What it actually
actually
is.
is and where those
Yes.
gaps are. Because
Yes.
usually those gaps are the ones that will point to the gaps within the processes internally, whether it's from the tooling perspective or from a
Mm-hmm.
people perspective or a little bit of both.
Right.
But starting with what you think it is, and then
Mm-hmm.
what is it actually?
Right. Absolutely. big things to uncover there.
Usually.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to make sure people know before we wrap up?
Yeah. There's just always people that are willing to help. There's lots of knowledge out there, whether it comes from you and I or, internet resources and things like that. But you don't have to feel overwhelmed, essentially. Like there is a way forward.
Yes, that's a really, really good way of putting it. You don't have to do it all by yourself.
Mm-mm.
You probably shouldn't try to do it all
Right.
by
Right.
yourself. Utilize all the resources around you, and there's a lot of people who will talk to you and happily brainstorm with you for free
Yes.
because there's people who care and there's people who
Yes.
want to help. And if you like those people, you want to bring them on, fantastic. And if you don't, it's just an access to some really great expert information. So
Hmm.
definitely ask for help.
Absolutely. I love
All
that.
right. Alicia, thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll do this again.
Yes.
And way to work with the technology. I, I
Right.
appreciate you being so flexible.
Right. Got to make options happen.
Gotta make options happen. All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.